Hello and welcome to a special edition of Inside D2Football. Tonight, we bring you D2Football.com's National Championship Preview Show, along with Tony Nicolette, Chris Ferguson, Matt Witwicky, and Justin Palizzi. I'm Chuck Bittner, here to help you and everyone else get acquainted with our national finalists. We'll talk about both teams individually, we'll go through their journey to the championship, and we'll hear from both coaches. We were fortunate to have both of them join us for exclusive sit-down interviews earlier this week. Whit and I were able to meet with both coaches. We'll play those interviews for you, and we even have a few special guest analysts who will join the show tonight. Whit, we were able to line up two outstanding sitting head coaches to join us to help break this down. Let's start with Coach Glogowski from the University of Sioux Falls. Coach Glow joins the show, and he's going to help us just understand more about what it's like to make it through a playoff run. He's been through this before. Coach Glow, thank you, and welcome to Inside D2 Football.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. And also joining the show, he's been on our MIAA Weekly show, and he's also was a guest on Inside D2 Football last year. Coach Lambo, Coach Josh Lamberson from Central Missouri Mules. Coach Lambo, thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate you having me. Honored to be here with you guys. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're gonna work through a lot of the optics here. We've got a lot of moving parts to tonight's show. A lot of heads here on the board as well. Some of the guys will come and go throughout the show. Whit and I are going to do a little bit of orchestration to try to make the most out of this. We have a lot to get through. We are down to our final game of the season. We started all this back in August. Guys, it really is hard to believe that we are now down to the last game of the season, but not hard to believe that our national championship features Ferris State and Valdosta State. This is actually the third time that they have met in McKinney, Texas, in the national championship game. All of those since 2018, which was actually Ferris State's first trip to the national championship game. They're currently 1-1. Valdosta won that first matchup in 2018, and Ferris won the rematch in 2021. So we have the rubber match down in McKinney on Saturday afternoon. Whit, let's kind of walk through just a few things just to kind of show everyone where the teams are at right now. Both teams are in McKinney. They traveled on Wednesdays. You see the police escort out to the airport. There's the Bulldogs disembarking from the airplane after they landed in Texas. Of course, they know the drill quite well. And Coach Annese did say they were very much looking forward to some nice weather down in Texas. It's been pretty cold up in Michigan. This is the venue. If you haven't seen it before, of course, we've shared it before. It's been on national TV a few times. McKinney ISD Stadium in McKinney, Texas. Not like very many high school football stadiums you walk into, guys. It is an unbelievable venue. Probably rivals most of the best FCS stadiums that you'll see that are out there. Whit, Poe, I know you guys have both been down there. It just doesn't look like a high school stadium, does it?
Oh, and Chuck, our normal setup was kind of off to that right-hand side, that second level there. They would give us some space to go ahead and do like a pregame show from there and so forth. And Coach Poe, I can remember, you and I going ahead, walking the sideline a little bit, and it's a pretty comfy venue, isn't it?
It is. It's a great facility. It's set up very well, not just for the players and the sidelines, but the spectators, for us as media. It's set up very well. It's a great venue to host this event. Last year it was packed. I don't think there was an empty seat in the building. So a great facility, and it's really exciting that we get to keep going back there year after year.
Absolutely, Poe. It is a beautiful facility. So let's take a look at just a reminder of how we got to this point. Our Final Four from last week, of course, we unpacked both of those semifinal games on Sunday nights inside D2 Football. Two very memorable football games that we got to see last Saturday. But when the dust all settles, we have our number 1 and number 2 in our top 25 poll facing off in the national championship game. So, Whit, let's start diving into the teams themselves. So let's take a look at Valdosta. And as we do this, guys, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of orchestration. We're going to take a few of the members off the board just so we can get a little bit more focused. So Poe and Kafer, of course, our two resident Super Region 2 experts, are well entrenched in that area. We're going to talk a little bit about Valdosta State, kind of unpack their season to this point. Guys, when I look at Valdosta State's schedule, obviously the number one thing that jumps off is all W's from top to bottom, the only undefeated team left in D2. So obviously that jumps out. But I really kind of look at this as 3 and maybe even 4 different parts to their season. Those first 3 games, all out of conference, playing Albany State, Newberry, and Fayetteville State. Probably not teams that come immediately to mind when we think about top 25, the really nationally prominent programs. But to get out of that 3-0, I thought was really good and a great way for them to start the season, because those are all teams that we expect to be very relevant and be winning programs in their conference. Kfer, let me start with you. I thought that was a very impressive 3-0 start for the Blazers.
Yeah, that also had to come out the gate a lot stronger than they did last season. If you think about that game against Albany, it was 20-16. And so the way that they kind of came out and showing that not only did they return quite a few playmakers, but sort of took the next step with the building up the roster. And Albany State didn't have a bad season either. They had a Harlan Hill nominee at quarterback. And so to be able to do what they did just out the gate was pretty good, and Fayetteville was a little down this year, but I think there's a difference between, when you shut out a team like that, that still says a lot to me.
For sure. And then the middle part of that schedule, Poe, I think this is where Valdosta was a little bit off of our stream of conscious for a little while, simply because the middle part of that schedule is a little bit softer than we would like to see, typically going through the Gulf South. They opened their conference portion of the schedule. Erskine shorter. I mean, North Greenville was a good team. They gave them a game. But you kind of look through that middle part of the schedule, there was just nobody in there that could really challenge them. And it's kind of at that point where Valdosta's still winning games, but we're not really paying attention to them that much during that middle part of the season.
No, and I think the thing to me that stands out is that game that was unfortunately canceled due to weather against West Alabama. That was going to be a matchup for Valdosta State that I think was going to get a really good barometer for us on the outside of where Valdosta State is. And, do they come out of that game with a win? Is it close? Does West Alabama win? Like, where does that thing end up? And that was the barometer game, I think, for all of us as we sat there, because that North Greenville game, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost positive that was in a rainstorm and it was tight there into the fourth quarter. And so that game, they had to persevere. They had to win. That was on the road in Greenville, or in Tigerville rather. So a tough game. You're missing that one. And so to me, they were resilient. They battled through some stuff. That was when they got hit with the hurricane. They had to stay together. And so they got wins when it mattered, Chuck. And I think that's something, yes, we overlooked that middle part of the schedule, but they had to persevere and go through some stuff as a team, which I think brought them together.
Yeah, and there was almost a whole week there where they were completely displaced from their campus because they didn't have power in Valdosta. They didn't have utilities. They spent several days in Atlanta. It was actually kind of, if I recall, it was kind of touch and go as whether or not their Erskine game was going to happen as well. So they actually almost lost a second game also as part of that also. But let me stay with you for a second, because when we got towards the back part of their schedule, we had been looking at those last 2 games for a long time, because as they're working through, the middle part of that schedule, Mississippi College show on, we just didn't really expect them to have a whole lot of challenge for Valdosta.
Right.
So we still had some questions, right? And we still had some reasons to be a little bit skeptical about who this Valdosta State team is. Then you get down to playing the last 2 games of the year. You have to play at Delta State and then West Florida. Both of those teams at some point in the season were in our top 25.
Yeah.
We know the quality of those programs. When they went to Delta State, there was a lot of love for the Statesmen in our picks when we previewed that game. And they kind of left no doubt. That was really the game that kind of made us say, okay, this Valdosta State team really is a legit contender here.
Yeah, that was the point, I think, when it kind of we garnered that attention of saying, hey, they can make a run here. Delta State, yes, maybe the record didn't end where it is, but we know that's a tough place to play. We know they're a tough team to play this year. They were a little up and down as the season went. We didn't really know what to expect. They did get a lot of love from us on the picks, but ultimately they went in there and they handled business. And that game, while it was 49 to 20, it wasn't as close as it really was. They handled that game, and then they have to turn around the week later and they play West Florida, and they handle West Florida. And to me, those are two very, very quality wins coming out of a lull in the schedule. And it can be often hard to beat teams 52-0 for 35-10, stuff like that, 59-6, and then have to come in there and play two really, really hard opponents in back-to-back weeks. And they did it, and they did it convincingly. And I think that talks about, we talked about them having to come together. They had to battle through some adversity in that middle part of the season, and that just prepared them for playing those two games. So I think those two games really, to us and to me at least, hey, wait a minute, they're showing some stuff and they're playing complete football. Defense is playing well. They're offensively, they're moving the football. They've got some really talented players around Sammy Edwards, and they're not making mistakes on special teams. And they showed that in those two games, Chuck.
Yeah, and West Florida was really peaking late in the season too, right? I think we expected that to be a really tight ball game, and that was just pretty much all Valdosta. So as we get to the end of the season, they finish as 10-0. They get the number 1 seed in Super Region 2, so they got that all-important first-round bye. And then Ferg, when they go into the playoffs, so you get a couple of conference champions back-to-back with Miles and Virginia Union coming to town. Some of the things that you saw there, I mean, we kind of expected maybe Miles was going to have good defense, but not some offense. I think a lot of us thought Virginia Union was going to give Valdosta State a game, and the Blazers, there were some few early struggles in there, but at the end of it, a pretty convincing win there for the Blazers.
Yeah, and I would say with both Miles and Virginia Union, both had pretty good defenses. I think what you got to see from Valdosta is their ability to make some adjustments and when you can do that in the playoffs in particular, like you're not necessarily committed to one like offensive philosophy, like that makes you very hard to defend. And you really saw that really in that Virginia Union game where, they've been kind of predominantly, more balanced, maybe a little favor the run. And they really sort of exploited the secondary when it seemed like Virginia Union was more focused on stopping the run. So, like, I just think in those two games in particular, you really just saw how dynamic Valdosta was. A lot of people probably, look at Sammy Edwards' numbers and think that, hey, like, he's not as good as he was last year. Well, he didn't have to be because they built that offense to not be so dependent on the passing game. But it's there, and we've seen that in these playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good transition, Ferg. Let's actually take a look at some of the Blazers' key contributors. Obviously, this is a team that's going to the national championship, so we could fill a ton of cards talking about some of their best players. But here's a few that we want to spotlight. You actually just mentioned Sammy Edwards, Ferg. Yeah, overall, the passing numbers down a little bit this year, but the production that they're getting out of him, right? And I think any coach would take 30 touchdowns to 2 interceptions.
Yeah, and Valdosta is actually like the third most pass efficient team in the country. When you look at 2 interceptions all season, like that speaks volumes as to he's not being pressured, and he didn't have to be. Like a lot of teams are you're having to pick and choose your poison here, and that's going to leave a lot of matchups in the passing game if you're focused on you're selling out on the run. That leaves a lot of opportunities for Sammy Edwards and those wide receivers to take advantage. And so, efficient. That's what this is. That's what Sammy Edwards is this year.
Very efficient. And you actually mentioned on Sunday night talking about, the kind of the 1-2 punch there they have with Franklin and Hester. And, their numbers are fairly equal, and it kind of tends to just to be, who's the healthiest at any point in time, or who just tends to have the hot hand. And we saw, Saturday against Minnesota State, Alfonso Franklin scored all 5 of their touchdowns, but who knows? It could be different when they get to the McKinney. It could end up being more of a Blake Hester show.
I think Alfonso Franklin is still giving Mankato some fits after that game. I mean, the way he not just ran, but also caught the ball and was just so effective out of the backfield. But that wasn't the only game, right? He did the same against Virginia Union as well. So he's kind of had a bit of a hot streak. And I think that just shows the depth. Valdosta is a team that has like over 20 graduate students. These are folks who have played at different levels of college football. They've sort of come together, and it's sort of a next man up mentality when you have that collection of talent that they have.
Yeah, and then Poe, on the defensive side of the ball, Larry Elder there, the safety, was the GSC Co-Defensive Player of the Year on a little bit of a unique defense that you see from Valdosta. They typically go with 3 down linemen, and on some saps we'll see 4 linebackers, some will see 5. We get a lot of unique looks out of that defense, don't we?
Yeah, they're really versatile, and I think Larry Elder is kind of the staple of that, right? Like, they move him around. He comes down, he fits in the run really, really hard. You don't get 93 tackles if you're not a solid tackler and you're mobile and you could do some things defensively. And so he is very dynamic in what they do, and they move him around. That is a defensive coordinator's dream when you have a guy like that you can kind of maneuver around the field, whether it's matchups, whether it's coverages, and whatever that may be, whatever that scheme is for that week. And he does a really, really nice job of that. 93 tackles, again, you have to be a really solid tackler, and B, you have to have a lot of trust, because they're going to move you around. They're going to bring you maybe on some pressures or put you on an island that they trust you to make those tackles. He also has 11 tackles for loss, rather, and 3.5 sacks. So he's getting in the backfield. They are bringing him on pressures and doing some things to bring him and to get him moving. So obviously those coaches, they like what he does. They like the multiplicity and the dynamic ability that he brings to their defense. He is a guy that is a playmaker for them on that side of the ball.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good observation, Poe. He's a safety by definition, but probably pays a little bit more like an extra linebacker that's on the field. So,
and I think one thing that does attribute that, Chuck, is the way Valdosta is offensively. And so what they do and how dynamic they are, he's getting to practice against that every day of the week. You know what I mean? He's seeing that. So what is he going to see on Saturday that he hasn't seen Monday to Friday? There's not a lot.
Yeah, good point. Well, let's bring Whit back in. And Whit, I think we're going to pull down the slides, because I think you have some highlights for us to kind of show some of the visuals of all the things that we've been talking through about Valdosta.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring the coaches back on in, Chuck. And we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit with them and do a little bit here of Chalk Talk with Whit. Chuck, I've heard in this industry that you haven't made it until you've done Chalk Talk with Whit on a D2 football show. That'll be the new standard, right, guys?
Well, we've made it.
Yeah, right. I know you guys are all excited. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna go through a little bit of the Valdosta film, guys, and then I'm gonna ask you guys some questions about it after we do a little bit of a run through. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Blazers, and we're gonna see Sammy Edwards right here doing a little RPO and hitting Rodney Bullard, who is faster than I am, and he's going to be giving the ball to the referee pretty quickly on that one. And you can see some of the speed on their defense here with Valdosta. They play that 3-man front, but they're not afraid to attack. And this is the running back that we saw a little bit last week be super productive against Mankato, and that's Alfonso Franklin. You see he bounces it to the left, bounces it back out to the right. He's got a little bit of moves there where he can break on out. And then the other back, look out, Blake Hester. Now you can see why they're sharing time, because they both offer a little bit something different, and both can be home run hitters. And here's Sammy Edwards, our quarterback, out in space. So, he may have times where he needs to do a little bit of that, this coming week with Ferris. And here they are with Rodney Bullard, number 1. And you can see the danger he is, guys, when he gets in space. Here they are bringing a pressure against West Florida, who can't get away. And then as we go ahead and we kind of continue a little further in, this is Hester once again, off right tackle, breaking loose. And he's kind of got another gear right there. Once again, you see Edwards going ahead, getting outside the pocket, making some plays on the RPO once again. And we're going to take a look at this with the coaches here in just a little bit greater detail in a moment. But we're wrapping up some of the look here with Valdosta. You see Sammy making some plays with his feet. And then we're going to hit a go route right here to the bottom of the screen with Bullard. You can kind of see his speed if, people crowd the box a little bit. That's a nice little weapon for them to have. And coaches, we go ahead and we kind of take a look at that. Guys, when you just saw those highlights we walked through, I'm going to start with you, Coach Glow. You go ahead and you see the way how well that they do RPO stuff, the way that they are balancing the run game. Looks like a fairly tough defend just right out of that shoot, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, obviously we've been done playing for a couple weeks, so I've had a chance to follow some of these teams and watch the games myself. And certainly don't see a ton of Valdosta on film, of course, during the season. But I do know Mankato intimately well. And to see those guys kind of struggle, quite frankly, with the running back number 25 in space was a little surprising. The RPO stuff puts you in a bind on the perimeter. There's no doubt about that. And then you got a quarterback who's mobile enough to hurt you with his feet. And I'm sure Coach Lambo would agree. Getting a guy that you got to defend, throwing it and running it, and whether you pack the box or you play man coverage, you try to play some man coverage, they got a guy who can run by you. That's the reason why they're undefeated and playing for a national title.
Coach Lambo, you being a play caller yourself, what do you see when you go through some of that and we unpack a little bit of their offense right there?
Well, to kind of reiterate what Coach Glow said from the standpoint of what they do from an RPO perspective, it just puts those outside force defenders and those safeties in such a bind because, ultimately what they do with their run game, they don't just run the football. They're not going to run the football into a box that they don't ultimately like. And so they are putting those guys in conflict. And with every run play that they have the opportunity to throw it out there either on a screen or on a glance behind a safety. So that's number one. Number two, when those safeties or those force defenders on the perimeter play back and they give it to those backs, well, then now those guys are trying to get closer to the box to make the play. And those guys are fast. And not only are they fast, but they're powerful. They have the ability to break tackles and make people miss out in the open field. And then the last one that we kind of talked about, Sammy is such a dynamic athlete. Yes, very accurate with the football. We mentioned the 30 touchdowns compared to the 2 interceptions. So, he can sit there in the pocket and digest whatever it is that the defense is trying to throw at him and be an accurate passer to make really good decisions. But here's the other part about his game that I think is underrated is his ability to tuck the football and run. In one of those last clips, he made 3 people miss as he was running down the field. Not only is he a great thrower from the pocket, but he can tuck that ball and get you 20 yards or on 3rd and medium or even 3rd and long. If you're trying to play coverage, tuck that ball and get the first down. And I think he's underrated when he's moving as a passer as well. He's extremely accurate when he's on the run. And those guys do a great job with the scramble drill of improving and being able to make some plays. So just overall, I think that so versatile and so dynamic with so many players mixed in, starting with their quarterback, that they are extremely hard to defend.
Coach, I'm going to go ahead, Coach Lambo. I'm going to pull up those RPOs. We're going to take a look at 2 of them. And I want you and I to kind of walk through this a little bit as we go ahead and pull it on up. Now, Coach, here we go. We're going to see we're offering the football right here. As Sammy's offering on the RPO, tell us a little bit, if you would, what are his keys? What is he reading? Is he taking a look at those backers coming up and thinking I'm going to have that kind of that underbelly in the middle? How do you think that he's seeing that?
He absolutely is. And if you look, it's a set where they have a single high safety, so they're playing zone coverage, and so Sammy, those backers through to the free safety right here, and they're running a glance route, as you can see, which is just like a miniature post route. Where the receiver's coming back to the middle of the field. So if he has an open window where those backers split and the safety is either deep enough or coming up towards the box close enough where he can pull that ball and throw it to put those defenders in conflict, that's exactly what he is doing right here. And these guys are elite at it. And I know this is what drives, defensive coaches crazy because they ride that football for so long. And, the officials are supposed to, I think it's 2 to 3 yards within the original line of scrimmage to let those offensive linemen go down there. And Valdosta definitely presses the limits with those. So it's extremely hard to defend.
Let's take a look at this other play against Delta that we saw earlier in the highlights. This one goes for an 80-plus yard score and kind of helps break this game open. And you're going to see Bullard from the top running the route. So, Coach, as we're going ahead and we're offering here, Sammy once again kind of sees guys coming into the box here, and
Yep.
he's got to like his numbers on the backside, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. They're in a too high look here, and so the middle of the field is open. So he knows that it's a cover 2 type of look. So he's really just reading this backer right there, and so he's going to throw it over that backer's head. He steps up, middle of the field is open right here on that glance route, same route that they ran earlier, that they had the big gain on, and so but now there's no free safety to ultimately kind of make that play. So they split the 2 safeties, catches the glance route. Good luck catching that guy.
Glow, let me ask you on the flip side of the ball. How do you think? Do you think Ferris is going to have some challenges with this, or do you think Ferris has seen enough of this and throughout the year, and do you think that they're going to be able to keep up with all the speed of Valdosta? What's kind of your immediate take, having watched both teams this last week?
Well, I think the first thing is, and touching on what Coach said, when you get to this point in the season, and you're starting to see the same type of schemes and the glance route, those type of things. The one thing I noticed on that play is they bring a fullback into the game with a 2-back set. So they're forcing your hand to defend the run first, right? And so I would imagine with Ferris, you're going to see some type of man on the backside and maybe protect the backside glance or post to take that away from him. But if it were me, you're bringing that extra safety down in the box because you're influencing the 2-back run game, right? Putting that safety in a bind. And if it were me, you got to play some combination of, like he said, closing the middle of the field off, whether that's playing man on the backside and having a high safety read and run pass off the fullback action. Because if you go back and look at that play, I'm pretty sure they were in a slot formation to the field. So you're going to get some variation of probably some kind of 3-on-2 coverage to the field, right? But on the backside, I just don't think you can sit in the cover 3 on the backside and leave that glance route open, because as you bring the weak side backer into the box to protect against the 2-back run game, it puts you in a bind. And I do think this, and just being in a few big games myself, your player's ability to execute is far more important than schematics, you know? And we talk about that all the time. In the biggest games, I don't think Ferris is going to do something they haven't done all year. And at the time in the playoffs where you're at right now, you've got film from the entire season. So if I'm Brandon Anderson, I'm sitting there going back and I'm the DC at Valdosta, I'm the DC at Ferris. I'm going to look at similar teams throughout the course of the season that gave us certain looks, and you're going to have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get. I don't think you have time with a short travel day and all those things that go into a playoff game like this to reinvent the wheel. And so it's going to come down to his ability to hit that glance on time, the ability to tackle the guy in space and make him tee it up and earn everything, and maybe limit those big plays.
Great. Well, for our viewers, we're going to go ahead and we will talk again with the coaches about Ferris State here momentarily. Chuck, we do have an interview that we're going to play here with Coach Tremaine Jackson from earlier in the week. And then we'll go ahead and, kind of circle back with everybody and talk about the Bulldogs.
Yeah, great conversation there. That was, I know we were kind of joking about chalk talk with Whip, but that was great. It's probably the smartest conversation we've ever had on the show. So that was great. And the interview that we have with Coach Jackson, he did this with us on Monday evening. So very appreciative to him and Valdosta for making that happen. Exclusive sit down. This is just with us. This is not with other gathered media. So we were very fortunate to get a few minutes of his time. So Whit, let's pull ourselves down and we'll roll the tape and hear from Coach Jackson.
I'll let you handle that, Chuck. Thanks.
And we welcome Valdosta State head coach Tremaine Jackson to our special episode of Inside D2Football, previewing the national championship game. Coach Jackson's in his 3rd year at Valdosta State and has the Blazers back in the national title for the 7th time in program history. Well, Coach, congratulations on making it to the championship game. As I'm sure you found out by about 4 o'clock on Saturday, this is not a normal game week for your program. Tell us a little bit about how the preparations have been to get your team prepared to go down to McKinney, Texas.
No, Chuck, man, first of all, man, we're happy to be here and really excited about the week, but you're exactly right. It is nothing like a regular game week with the amount of meetings with the NCAA, and that just starts your week. Starting on Sunday and then today and Monday and just the amount of media that you now get. Normally we get the local Valdosta media and South Georgia media, but we got people calling from all over the country and doing interviews, and it's just really an exciting time, and it's really good for our young men and women in our locker room to be able to experience this stuff, man. Sammy Edwards being able to talk to somebody from California or something like that had to go watch him play because they probably don't see him play very much. But just the attention and the exposure for our program and our school It's really good. And this is why you do what you do in August, so you can have this opportunity in December.
Let me ask you, Coach, you guys are coming off of a game against a storied Minnesota State program that you're very familiar with, having been at Sioux Falls. You knew they were going to be a run-heavy Northern Sun team. You had to kind of let your team try and get them to understand what you guys were going against, something different than maybe you had been. And at the same time, how do you think they responded to that?
Yeah, man, I first of all, that Mankato team is second to none as far as how they're coached, the way that their program has been together, the continuity of their program. Their offensive coordinator was a player when I was at Sioux Falls or leaving Sioux Falls. And so just to see the continuity that they had from way back in 2013 to now, they just changed the people in the jerseys. They don't change much. And it's a really good operated program. Got a lot of respect for Coach Hoffner. But, it's funny because in February, during our all-season training, we scream out, one day we're going to have to play Mankato. We're going to have to play Mankato, and they're going to send us to the snow. The committee don't like us. We make up things as coaches to try to get our guys ready and make them realize that all football ain't played the same way.
Right.
And the way we play football in the Southeast is not how they play it in the Minnesotas of the world and in the Dakotas. So I was really proud of the way our guys responded, because that's something we also talked about in fall camp. If we did what we needed to do during the season, we would get this opportunity, hopefully. And those guys were ready for a physical football game. I thought the game was physical. We had some missing pieces there early that thankfully will be back now. But, man, we had to go do it with some guys that hadn't played very much, and even they were ready to answer the bell. So I think our staff did a phenomenal job of just making sure guys get ready, especially from a defensive standpoint, because Minnesota State added the quarterback to the run fit, and we just don't see a lot of that down here. People are very protective of the quarterbacks.
Yeah. Coach, I thought Alfonso Franklin really shined for you. 5 scores in that game was a real problem for Minnesota State. And I think you got a chance to really see what he can be. Yeah. At the same time, I think the people who are brand new to watching you guys don't realize that he's not the only guy in your running game. And, you guys had almost 2,000 yards between 2 guys and 30 scores. So kind of let folks know a little bit more about your run game and what it's become.
Yeah, I think, you see it on the film with Alfonso and then Blake Hester. Sammy Edwards has even gotten some of the run game going, not just from a scramble standpoint, but design run game stuff that we've done for him. Not very much because you got those other 2 guys. But Jaden Henry is in that room. Bud Chaney is in that room. There's 4 guys that I think can play anywhere in our conference, especially, and maybe a lot of places across the country. That we're fortunate enough to have in that running back room. But the biggest difference, and they will tell you, is what we do now on the offensive line. We needed to have a run game like we have. And that's why we didn't make it out of the quarterfinals a year ago, just being quite honest. We just didn't have it. We ran into a monsoon in Valdosta, Georgia, and couldn't throw it. And, man, we needed a run game that we didn't have. And so we set out, Coach Carlson, our O-line coach, Coach Craig, our offensive coordinator. Those guys have done a really good job, as all of our staff, of just really making sure we can run the football when needed. And to be where we are right now, had we not been able to run it, then we'd be watching this podcast,
sure,
wishing we were there.
Well, Coach, we've seen a lot out of your running game this year, but you do still have an outstanding quarterback and a 2-time Harlan Hill finalist in Sammy Edwards. He's had big shoes to step into. There's a long history of great quarterbacks at Valdosta State. And his role's actually been a little bit different this year because of that run-based offense that you've had. Tell us a little about Sammy as a player and the leadership that he brings to your offense.
Man, I call him 12. I don't call him Sammy Edwards. I just call him 12, man. Man, you're talking about a kid that when I took the job, he was a backup quarterback, had just played in the national championship game. I think he played 2 snaps because Ivory Durham helmet came off. But he texted me as I was walking through the mall in Grand Junction, Colorado, and said, "Hey, Coach, I'm the backup quarterback, but I want you to know I want to compete for the job." And I was like, man, who is this kid? I've never heard of him before. And so it just kind of showed me who he was as a person. Man, he knew coming in, he was going to be a backup again, but he approached every day in that 22 season as a starter. And I think when he got the reins that he had to win. Sammy Edwards had to compete for the job in 23. We brought in some guys to beat him out, and he won the job and won the opportunity. Most of all, man, this dude won our football team, and people rallied around him. And I think what you've seen over the last 2 years is a guy that has submitted his name in the books here at Valdosta State at quarterback, which is a very hard thing to do. But it's so unselfish that he's not going to throw for 4,000 yards this year unless we throw for 1,000 in the national championship game. But he's so unselfish, man. He loves handing the ball off and watching these guys. He loves watching the Alfonso Franklin. He loves just watching the team and the collective be successful. I think he's the best player in the country. Obviously, I'm biased. But I think the best player in the country is the most unselfish dude on the team. And no doubt at Valdosta State, he's the most unselfish winner and competitor that I've ever coached. And I hate that Saturday is going to be our last time together on the football field because I can't replicate it. And if I could clone him, I would because he's just that good of a person, great family, and he just graduated on Saturday too, man. So we're extremely excited about his future.
That's outstanding. Congratulations to him for that. So when we look at your team and look at your culture, tell us about dog mentality. We hear you talk about it, especially during the recruiting timeline. We hear you talk about dog mentality. We see it on the jerseys. We see it on the front of the helmet. Tell us what that means and tell us how your program embraces it.
Yeah, man. You know, during COVID, we really couldn't coach no football. I had this grand plan when I got the Mesa job. I'm finally on the sticks, as the kids say. I'm finally here, and here's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna go through spring ball. Obviously, we all know the story when we all sitting around watching stories on Netflix and things of that nature, right? And so while I was in that time, what we could do was recruit. We could get phone calls from coaches and emails, especially because recruiting had kind of halted. And so everybody who called basically said, hey, coach, I got a dog for you. You need this guy in your program. He's a dog. So I'm out on the walk one day, man. I'm like, what is a dog? What kind of dog do we want in our program? And we came up with 3 words. We want a dog that's disciplined, a dog that's obedient, and a dog that has a lot of grit. And those 3 things, man, embody who we are. We're disciplined. We do exactly what we say we're going to do regardless of who's watching. We submit and comply with the authority for the greater good of the team. That's what we define as obedience. And, man, we've got a lot of passion and perseverance for long-term and meaningful goals, a.k.a. grit. And so we put that on those guys' helmets if they earn the right to be a dog. And in our program, if you're a dog, you can wear one sleeve on one arm. If you're a dog, you can wear the one sleeve on one leg. You can kind of wear what you want to wear in the program because you've exemplified who you are and you're at the top. And so we're Blazers, man, but our mentality is so dogmatic, and our kids have bought into that since we've been here. And it took a little longer than what we thought, but, man, no doubt we turned the corner with that toward the end of the 22 season, and we've just been running in it ever since, man. The other key thing with dog, if you turn dog around, it spells God, man, and that's who's at the center of it all for me. And we make no qualms about it, whether we're a state school, Christian school, whatever. That's what it is for us. And everybody in our program, they embrace that and they want to be that. And it's just a fun time and a fun thing for them to learn. And it gives them something to hold on to when they're done with football.
Coach, let me ask you, your defense hasn't always been the story, maybe in the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
And, you brought your guy, Brandon Anderson, with you from Sioux Falls. You guys have been together for a while. All of a sudden, this defense is second nationally in points allowed at 11 points a game. Heck of an accomplishment, especially considering, a few years back, you guys gave up 70 to Delta, and things weren't how you wanted them to be. Yeah. Explain how that's developed over the course of time.
Man, we believe in a certain style of defense. I believe in Brandon Anderson and Trent Early, our 2 coordinators. Brandon, obviously, being the defensive coordinator, Trent being the co-coordinator. And with Brandon Anderson, man, might be one of the smartest dudes I know. I'm talking about an MBA from the University of Sioux Falls. People don't really know what that is unless you're there. But this dude is extremely smart. This dude is extremely all football. I met Brandon Anderson in a closet when I got the job. He was breaking down film as a young linebacker, GA, at Sioux Falls. And just over time, we developed a really strong relationship. His dad baptized my daughter, man. And so we're really close as families. But the first year, we didn't have the success that we wanted to have. And what happens in our game right now is when people don't experience success immediately, they abandon ship. That doesn't work anymore. Man, we believe in what we do. I believe in Brandon Anderson. And so we knew what our deficiencies were in spite of everybody else not knowing. We understood it. And so all I asked the university to do is just give us the time and we'll get this stuff together. And man, that dude went to work like none other. That dude, and he got his staff to go to work. Trent came in as the co-coordinator, and they started recruiting and coaching and scheming and doing those things. And now, man, I feel like the old guy on staff. I used to be able to get in there and get in the mix of the schematics. They kind of just wait on me to leave and then get back to the business of it, man. But so proud of Brandon because, man, I think he's next as a head coach. I think this dude has the skill set and certainly the knowledge to do that. And Trent does too. And really proud of those guys. Got some young coaches with them on that staff, and they've been able to turn it. And I don't know if people ever would have thought that they'd be talking about defense at Valdosta State. We around here in the program, we've had the Black Swarm, and they've been really good for the time. But when you're talking about scoring and being one of the top scoring defenses in the country, right, that's normally us on offense. Right. And so for people to be talking about Valdosta State defense is why we came here, because we felt like we could put good defense with good offense and be in the situation we in, and it all came true. So I'm like an old uncle over there, man, just kind of sitting on the side watching these guys do special things and get their players to play in a special manner. And so it's fun for me with.
Well, Coach, as we kind of bring this to a close, we have to get a few comments from you. I know you've probably had an opportunity to start looking at Ferris State, of course, your opponent this weekend in the national championship game. What do you see when you throw the film on and look at the Bulldogs? I know that there's probably a whole lot that jumps right off the film.
A lot of continuity in the program, man. Coach Annese has done a really good job. He's been there so long and has done a good job for so long until the program is just rolling. And they've always, we run across them in recruiting for players. Ferris State is one of those teams where when you get a bye week during the season, you always kind of peek over to the right and get on the D2Football.com scores and kind of see what they're doing in case you're in this situation. And certainly they command that type of respect. We understand that this is our third time playing this institution, this program, in this game, but they've got the same coach. We've got this is the third staff that Coach Annese will play against in this game. So I certainly think the two programs are valued and warranted in being there. We've been 1-2 all year. We've kind of been on this crash course toward one another, and so we respect what they do in such a great manner, man. Until certainly we watch all the tape. I watched all 14 games thus far. Probably going to go back and watch it again. Got a plane ride, going to watch it again because I got a lot of respect for what they do in all three phases of the game. And we know what we have to try to get done in order to slow that down. But good players, good coaches, well-respected program. Should be a fun national championship game. But I will say this, man. Our kids are ready, and I think the tournament got it right. We're not having the problems that the college football playoff is having, and everybody's complaining. This tournament, the way we do it in Division II, is rigorous, but I think the tournament gets it right. And I think these are the two top teams in the country, and we're going to get a chance to find out who's number one at the end of Saturday.
All right. Well, we can't wait to see it. We expect it to be a great game as well. Tremaine Jackson, head coach of the Valdosta State Blazers, thank you so much for joining us. Also, we do want to mention this. We're recording this on Monday. Coach Jackson today was named AFCA's National Coach of the Year. And we know this is all about your team and what you have going on with the national championship. But we want to congratulate you for that tremendous honor as well.
Thank you so much, guys. I look forward to talking to you again. Go Blazers.
All right. Well, that was head coach Tremaine Jackson of the Valdosta State Blazers. And again, we couldn't be more thankful that he was able to find some time in a very, very busy week for him to meet with us and do that interview. Whit, we're going to pivot here to talk about Ferris State. Before we do that, any final reactions on the comments there from Coach Jackson?
No, this is his first time at the championship, and you can just kind of feel his energy, getting ready to go, take that on. And, he in the 3 years he's been there, it's been an interesting ride, and it's interesting, to kind of see where they've now gotten to. And we all thought they could, and they have.
All right. So that's our rundown of Valdosta State. We're going to do the same now for the Ferris State Bulldogs. And for that, of course, we need to bring in our resident GLIAC expert, Tony Nicolette. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for spending some time there on the bench. I know that was a long segment to
Hey.
Appreciate you being here.
Hey, man, listening to Coach Jackson talk was a blast, man. That was fun.
It was really good. It was a fun animated interview. Let's talk about the Bulldogs, because obviously a very formidable opponent here for Valdosta State. Let's kind of walk through their season. Looking at the way their season shakes up a little bit like Valdosta's, you kind of have some different portions to this. Mm-hmm. I guess we have to start at the very beginning. That week 0 game at Pittsburgh State, we were all really excited about that. Coming out of that, 19-3 loss on the road. We know it was just one game out of conference, great opponent, tough environment, only one game. But when you think back to that, and I know it's a long time ago now, what are some of the thoughts that you had coming out of that game and kind of just around the GLIAC? Were you kind of thinking Pittsburgh State's got a long way to go in order to be this type of team this year?
Pittsburgh State or Ferris State?
Ferris State.
No,
reading the names and
you said Pittsburgh State. That's okay. I think we kind of got it right. Maybe that following Sunday, and maybe even as we headed into week 1, so to speak, out of week 0, there was a kind of a consensus amongst our crew, and I think we even said it on a couple of the shows, was it's not like Ferris is going to instantly stink. Right. So, okay, yeah, they had a rough day. Things didn't really look very good for them, but the premise that was going to be who they were for the rest of the season seemed pretty far-fetched. And we started to figure out pretty quickly that things were going to normalize. Even though in that week 1 game, they ended up losing Carson Gulker for the season. I know he's been back at practice here a little bit. I don't know whether he'll see any action or not, but even with those couple of challenges that they had in week 0 and week 1, it's not like we felt like Ferris was just going to fall off the face of the earth and struggle to be a 500 team for the season. And I think if you look at that Pitt State game, I think one of the things that really was the most noteworthy for me was, despite the fact that the offense just didn't have everything kind of sewed up just yet, the defense still played a pretty damn good game. I mean, not that Pitt State was the most prolific offensive team in the country this year, but when you go down and you play a team that was a top 5 team from the season before in their barn to get the season going, and you still hold them to 19 when your offense was constantly putting the defense in bad situations, you knew that they were going to be okay at a certain point, right? Because they were going to pitch a lot of good low-scoring games until the offense kind of got things figured out. So I think that was the biggest thing that coming out of that first week, that I like, okay, A, they're not going to stink, and B, if their defense is going to keep playing this way, they'll be just fine, probably quicker than anybody would realize.
Yeah, a lot of field goals for Pitt State in that game, only one offensive touchdown. So yeah,
correct.
Really good point about how well the defense played in that. So as they go forward, had a couple of get-right games after that. Lake Erie, just not quite at that level. We know Ashland's a quality program. They're actually a playoff team this year, so that was a really good win.
It didn't look like it at that point of the season, though, either.
Not at that point, and we kind of expected that. And then you kind of go through some games that we know that those teams just don't match up quite as well. The Wayne State game was a little weird because they started it Saturday and finished it the next day. So I don't know that there's a whole lot to take away there. Did it really take until the Grand Valley game to really kind of see what this team ultimately could look like as we got deeper into the second half of the season?
I don't think so, because again, I think as you watched them, even starting with that second game against Lake Erie, they basically immediately started to look like what you would have expected them to look like. And so as you walk through, even though some of those games may not have appeared to be the same, level of difficulty, if you will, Ferris still looked like Ferris in all those games. And so the idea that somehow everybody was, still questioning whether they were any good prior to the Grand Valley game, I think people, anyone who did that did so at their own peril, I think is kind of the way I would characterize that, because, again, this is the type of output that you see from them, both offensively and defensively, in most years when they are an elite level program. So, it didn't take very long for them to kind of get right. And I think the Grand Valley game, actually, in my mind, it almost didn't tell us as much as maybe the Saginaw Valley and Davenport games did in closing things out down the stretch. That Grand Valley game, they played really, really well. They had a super solid game plan for that game, and they executed it flawlessly. They were +3 in the turnover margin, which in a big game like that, that's critical. The Lakers were a little on the depleted side in that game. That's not an excuse. Ferris kind of did some of that to them. So I think while that game, didn't end up being, I think, what you would have wanted it to be, for them to hang in there and roll with the punches in that Saginaw game against an opponent that's coached by a team that, or coached by a coach that used to be on Ferris's staff, so they know Ferris extremely well, and with an up-and-coming quarterback that's really been playing great and had an awesome year starting for Saginaw Valley, I think for them to be able to kind of rally and stay in and fight through some difficulties that they had with a couple of turnovers in the second half, that told us more about Ferris, I think, as the season progressed, maybe than any other game. And then, to kind of same problem with Davenport, former coach on the staff, is leading another program in the league that you got to see at least once every year. And so when you play somebody who knows you that well, it's really tough to figure out how are you going to beat these guys again? How are you going to overcome them knowing what you want to do again? And I think those games were, just as telling as what they did against Grand Valley, who they've played, 7 times in the last 4 seasons.
Right. And then we get into the playoffs. So, of course, the Bulldogs get the #1 seed out of Super Region 3, which in that region, man, that is worth a lot when you can take a round off. And
no question about it.
Of a region, they get the #1 seed, but then they get an 11-1 MIAA champion coming into Top Taggart. And we think, this is probably a favorite for the Bulldogs, but we expect it to be a good game. And man, and I know weather was pretty wonky. It snowed and things got kind of out of control for Central Oklahoma pretty early, but I don't think any of us saw a score quite like that on the offering for that matchup.
Well, maybe not quite that lopsided, but if you're going to turn the ball over in Ferris's joint, you're going to run into problems like that. And that's kind of what we saw from Central Oak in that game. And we talked about this on Inside D2Football the night that the brackets came out, is if you really looked at that 1 seed position for Ferris and the fact that they were going to get a week off and then have to face either Central Oak or Ouachita Baptist in that second round. If you look at that, that was the less physical side of the bracket versus Harding having to go to Pitt State, Grand Valley taking on Indy, and then those 2 winners taking on each other and then facing the third round. So there was definitely a path that was slightly smoother for Ferris, and it worked to their benefit. Now, with that said, we still saw, in my opinion, the impacts of the physicality of that region, because when I was at Harding at Ferris State, Harding looked tired at points in that game. And so after having to go on the road 3 straight weeks and to play 2 extremely physical opponents in Pitt State and Grand Valley, even though they won those games handily, it doesn't mean that they weren't physical games and didn't take something out of Harding. And I think we saw something similar to that with Ferris against Slippery Rock. I think that Harding game had some physical demands on Ferris, even though they won it in a lopsided fashion. And that showed against Slippery Rock, where the Rock had a great game plan, and they took advantage of some things where they thought Ferris might have been a little bit weak. And I thought they looked maybe just a hair tired at times too. So the physicality of this region in total is just so significant. And again, I think Ferris did kind of get the benefit of being that 1 seed, which that's part of why you play for that 1 line, is you want those benefits, and they've cashed in on them. But I mean, that Slippery Rock game was, I think, a lot closer than we all thought. And if you really go back and watch that again, I'm sure Coach Annese is hammering the guys this week about just how close they were to not being here because, they outscored Slippery Rock 21-0 in the second half, but the first two possessions that the Rock had in the second half both ended inside of Ferris's 10-yard line. They convert those into any points, let alone 2 touchdowns. We might be having a very different conversation today than we are.
For sure. They also had a defensive touchdown and a special teams touchdown in that game.
Correct.
As well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, Ferris's offense in that first half did very, very little.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's the season to date for Ferris State. We mentioned some of these names, but let's talk about some of these players. And Tony, obviously, as we mentioned with Valdosta State, this is a team playing for the national championship. We could fill several of these cards with elite level players, but obviously we want to start with Trinidad Chambliss. Now, we knew coming into the season that Ferris had big plans for him. But when Carson Gulker gets hurt, and all of a sudden a player that you expected to be a part of a 2-quarterback system now has to be QB1 and really take over the role and really kind of change their offense too, because they haven't been as much of a 2-quarterback system since then. But man, he just grew into that role so quickly and became an elite level talent. It's been really impressive to watch.
Yeah, and impressive is the adjective too. I mean, I don't know how else you would feel about it. Is that an adverb or an adjective? I digress. We'll deal with that later. No, I remember I was at that game when Carson got hurt, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, I've seen enough out of Chambliss, just even in this game, to know that the prior week at Pitt State, probably more anomalous than anything else, but you saw the speed, you saw the decision-making, you saw the elusiveness, and I thought to myself, okay, if he can become a little more accurate and just be increasingly comfortable every week in what Coach Annese and that offensive staff asks of him, he's going to be a problem. And we saw flashes of it in little bits when he played last year, but he was playing in much more benign situations where, Malik Mitchell and Carson Gulker maybe had done a lot of the heavy lifting and the game was maybe a little bit out of hand. And so they would let Trin come in and get some reps and start to figure some things out. This went basically to being the entire team on his shoulders, almost like that. And for him to be able to mature and grow into the role with that much pressure basically thrust upon him almost instantaneously, it really is impressive. And I'm sure the folks at Ferris are really proud of the kid, and they should be. I mean, he has had a fantastic season. And I think one of the biggest things that you see out of them or have seen out of him is his ability just to stay within himself and not try to push too often. And I think that was one of the things last week is, you saw him make a mistake late in the second quarter against Slippery Rock. In those situations, that's the type of mistake he's made very infrequently throughout the season. And he'll have to replicate being more controlled in those types of situations against Valdosta on Saturday if they want to be able to win the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I found this interesting. Cannon Katzer is actually Ferris's first 1,000-yard running back in 20 years. If you can believe that. Now, they've had a lot of 1,000-yard rushers, but they've all been quarterbacks. First 1,000-yard running back that they've had, and his production in the playoffs is really impressive. More than 430 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. Last couple games, he's just been a huge weapon for them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, you hear Coach Annese talk often about, and I was alluding to this earlier, is that the system that Ferris runs is super difficult to defend, particularly when you haven't seen it. And so, Coach Annese, I know, gets tired of playing the same teams in the GLIAC all the time because, they've seen this stuff. They get the tape. They know what the tendencies are. And over time, you start to, figure out ways to at least slow it down, if not give it fits. When you play teams like a Central Oak who hasn't seen it before, all of a sudden it's like, a breath of fresh air and everything starts to work and you're putting people in bad spots and they don't know what to do. And I think one of the big beneficiaries of that stretch of play has been Katzer because, let's face it, over the last handful of years, that running back position, while important in that Ferris offense, has never been a primary focal point. And I think he's added a dimension in the way they've utilized him over the last stretch of the season that has made them more difficult to defend because he gets into space, he's explosive, and he can be a home run hitter. And that's one of the things that, if they can get a home run hitter at that running back position, it just adds another level of difficulty in being able to defend that offense. It really makes them problematic.
Yeah, and on the defensive side, let's give them a little bit of love too, because that defensive unit's been very good this year. Yeah, it feels like maybe we haven't necessarily thought of them as one of the most elite defenses because there isn't like a Caleb Murphy there that really dominates a lot of attention. But as a unit, they've been really, really good. And we've certainly highlighted one of the best players here.
Yeah, and if that defense is getting overlooked, it's being done so by people outside of the GLIAC, because everybody in our neck of the woods, they know who Sefa Sayapia is and what he means to that defense. And I mean, if you look at that linebacking core, I mean, they've got Sayapia, they've also got Connor Neer, who transferred to Oklahoma last year and then came back, missed part of the season due to injury, but still had a really good senior season for them. I think, to me, the defense, while the linebacking core is excellent, they are always so good up front. And despite the fact that the Caleb Murphys aren't there anymore, you still have the Deron Irving Bays and the Victor Nelsons and the guys of that, Sheldon Cages. I mean, those guys are so difficult to block. They make so many plays, and they are so fast to the ball. And I think that's one of the things that I think gets overlooked is, the linebackers tend to make a lot of tackles, but they're doing a lot of that work because of how difficult it is to contain Ferris's defensive front. And while the sack numbers maybe sometimes are more or less in certain years, again, being able to run your offense effectively when you're trying to contain what that front does is really, really difficult. And so that's the group that I think is sometimes maybe the most overlooked, which baffles me to no end, because those guys are usually the biggest guys on the field. But the way they play right, and the way they get coached up for Ferris it's second to none.
Yeah, absolutely. A really talented group. Well, let's bring Whit back in. And Whit, I think you've got some highlights to walk through with Ferris, and I'll leave it to you to bring our coaches back in and take us through the Chalk Talk. And then Whit, when you're ready, you can go ahead and roll the interview with Coach Annese whenever you are ready.
I will. We're going to watch some of the Ferris highlights here momentarily. Glow, just so you know, you're still on mute, so in case you wanted to speak up, maybe we should have just left it that way, Lambo. I don't know. But
we'll let the defensive guy talk too. He adds value.
Fair enough.
A little.
Well, let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at some of their highlights here. And guys, we're going to go ahead and kind of start off. Trinidad Chambliss is certainly kind of the straw that stirs the drink for them. We're going to watch some of the things that he's able to do, and then we'll kind of move into the rest of the football team a little bit from there. So, guys, we go ahead and we see Trinidad right here just being an athlete at the quarterback position. And, number 4 is a real problem. You see him go from, okay, we're going to pass, to all of a sudden I'm just going to tuck and run and get 15 yards. And this was against Grand Valley in a highly contested football game, first half. And then all of a sudden he breaks loose and kind of goes ahead and really gets the engine going for them. And this is where we get to go ahead and see a little bit of them on special teams. Tariq Brett has been a home run hitter for them in the kick return game. Took one back to the house against Slippery Rock last week and has been a problem. Ashland had a touchdown as well. And, once again, we're seeing here the way that they're able to set the edge, Ferris is, and for Trinidad to go ahead and just get loose right there. And I think we got a replay of that here in a moment where you can just kind of see the way they're just being brutes up front and going ahead and letting him be the athlete and go make those plays. And now we go ahead for a little bit further into the Grand Valley contest, and we're able to see some of their athleticism defensively. They're able to cover a lot of space. Jalen James makes a play right there. Then you're going to see, Tariq Brett on a jet right here. And they have a handful of guys who can go and make plays just like that. And then we got Trinidad. Need I say more on that play right there? And, that's just kind of a glimpse of them. Then you see Brady Rose, old high school quarterback, goes ahead and they use him in so many ways, number 22. And we'll see a little bit of that here momentarily. But here's Ferris passing. They'll throw the ball down the field. They'll go ahead and run crossing routes. This play right here where they run the triple out of the gun. Whoa. That's a tough defend. And now the same play again last week against Slippery Rock, but this time they give it to the dive, and he goes ahead and takes it to the house cannon catcher who we were just talking about a moment ago. So this is, there's so many ways that they can beat you here as you watch them. You see Trinidad makes this look so easy and hits, Cannon Katzer right here, and he ends up going for the score. They got athletes all over the place. They're able to play a few different styles offensively. And then you see on the defensive side, they're able to go ahead and take a play like this. And, I mean, look at the speed. And they go ahead and take defense and kind of turn it into offense. There's just, the Ferris squad here, you guys can see why they were dominating teams in the playoffs. And Coach Glow and Lambo, I'm going to start with you first. How do you see the Ferris State defense or offense being different than what we were just talking about with Valdosta? Is it the ability to go ahead and do all the jet sweeps and the whole, the triple action and everything?
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with from the standpoint of they're able to play so many different styles, and just in the clips that you showed right there, I mean, you've got the jet sweeps, you've got Trinidad running around on some designed quarterback runs. You've got giving the ball to their tailback, who was over 1,000-yard rusher, like you guys mentioned. You've got Trinidad from the pocket, just throwing darts all over the place. And then, on top of all of that, as I mentioned in the very first one, the triple, which is one of the hardest things for a defense to defend, because you just don't see it very often. And they do it in a very unique way, really combining some power and some finesse to all of it. So I think that's what's really tough, especially on a short week or really any type of week, when you're trying to prepare for everything that Ferris is going to throw at you from a defensive perspective. I think that is something that is extremely hard, and they don't have a weakness in their game. They can beat you in the perimeter. Like you said, they'll beat you up inside, or they'll beat you up inside, and then they'll stretch it to the perimeter, and they'll let their speedsters take over, and you've got trouble. So they have so many ways to throw those daggers at you throughout a football game.
Now, Coach Glow, before I go to you, Tony Nicolette. Tony, you've been obviously watching Ferris for years. Help me out if I'm wrong, but I don't recall them in the last few seasons being able to pound the middle quite as well as they are right now with Cannon Katzer over the last season or so. Do you kind of feel like they have even more to offer with their ability now for him to run inside the way he does?
To a certain extent, yeah. And I mean, I think, when Chuck and I were talking and reviewing their season, that's one of the things that he brought up, is they haven't had a running back go over 1,000 yards in over 20 seasons. I mean, that predates Coach Annese being there. Now, when you see the Jason Vanderlans and the J. Rue Campbells and the Reggie Bells and the Jared Bernhardt's go and get those big rushing seasons, you've kind of seen a lot of that. And so pounding the middle is something that's part and parcel with how they run that offense. It's just typically done with quarterbacks, and that's why you have seen, even though they had Malik Mitchell running the offense kind of as the starter over the last couple of seasons, you still saw a lot of Carson Gulker as a freshman and a sophomore, because he's that more physical presence to be able to pound that middle. So you're definitely astute to say that, doing this with a running back through the middle is a little bit more outside of what we've seen from them recently. To me, though, I don't know how much of the pounding it is. I think they're finding the right scenarios to get him the ball on that dive, and it doesn't end up looking like a pound the middle type of scenario. I mean, if you saw that two of those clips that you showed there, he's running through holes that you or I could make it through. So, I mean,
that's right. Tell him. They're
situationally getting the ball to Katzer in a very strategic, when the timing is strategic. And so he's physical enough to be a middle pounder, but if you really think about it, he's running through big holes where he's not doing it with the impact of trying to wear a defensive line down for an opponent. They're getting him the ball when they think he can hit a home run.
Coach Glow, how often do you run into a team that not only can spread it all over the place with the runs, throws, but also brings the triple into the mix?
Yeah, it's really unique. And, fortunately, unfortunately, I had the privilege of facing Coach Annese a few years ago in the playoffs. I think it was the final, maybe it was the regional finals. I can't remember, at Mankato.
2018.
Yeah. And, the thing that has not changed is he's such a good football coach at finding your weakness, and he's exploiting numbers. And in that regard, there's a lot of the triple option carryover to everything he does. It all has the same concept of you have to stop one or two elements, and sometimes three. Mm-hmm. And if you don't cover all three, they're out the gate and there they go. And so to your point, Tony, hitting you up the middle, it's not running ISO or dive or pounding it. It's It's not that. It's I'm going to run the fly. I'm going to pull your outside overhang and your inside backer with the fly motion, and then I'm going to hit you down the middle. And don't forget, they're extremely gifted up front. They're a big physical offensive line. And a lot of times they're, at least what I've found, and even looking back at some of those clips, I mean, a couple of those plays look very familiar, the triple stuff. They're putting your defensive end in a bind. Does he squeeze down to take off the dive, or does he sit in space? And that quarterback is so talented that if you leave enough space between the defensive end and the end of the offensive line, he can either cut inside the DN, he can give it, he can just outrun the defensive end. And now that defensive end, there's nothing worse as a DN and feeling like you're out in the middle of the open field and not able to tackle anybody, and you have no help. And so what I think that Valdosta, not to give away my pick, but Valdosta does have some overall team speed that they could, in essence, cut them some of those gaps down because they can chase inside out and push the ball wide. And I think versus Ferris, if that ball gets really, really wide running lateral, then you've got a chance to slow him down. But the more they hit it quick, the quicker you squeeze down inside. Now he gives the fly, and now it's gone out the gate, and then he pulls it and throws it. And now you're really frustrated because you're chasing your tail in a circle.
The handful of times that we've seen Ferris ever be not slowed down, but when they've had trouble moving the ball over the last couple of years, Coach Glow's nailed it. Teams have figured out how to get them out to the edge. And at that point, you have a different challenge, which is your backers or your secondary that's coming up to make plays. They better tackle in space.
And Valdosta's got some skill. Valdosta could track it down inside out with some of these types of players they have that have the field speed. It's going to turn into a Valdosta State speed versus a space game versus Ferris, in my opinion.
Coach Glow, let me ask you, when we look at Valdosta playing three-man down, their 3-3-5 defense, is there any risk with playing a 3-3-5 as opposed to four-man front that Ferris just is able to get downhill in a hurry on that three-man front?
Yeah.
Or how do you see some of that?
I mean, there's two ways to look at it. Yes and no. Yes, there's certainly fewer guys up on the line, but you've got a second level with an extra defender where you can laterally cover space from sideline to sideline because you have four backers and a 2-point. So, knowing Valdosta a little bit, obviously there's a Sioux Falls connection, and talking to Brand a little bit over the years. He's a really smart guy, like Coach Jackson mentioned, and he's going to have the ability to either roll a safety down and bump the front. They're probably going to have to adjust on the run to the pre-snap motion, right, and give yourself the extra, we call it a half a hat, right? Can you gain that extra half a man to be able to kind of cut down some of that space? And if where I thought last week was really interesting versus Mankato is Valdosta was challenged with the quarterback run game +1. It's very predetermined in a sense that if they run the +1 running back with the quarterback, you know where it's going to hit. The challenge this week is it's going to be a +1 type of run game because the quarterback has the ball. You're just not sure where it's going to hit. So you've got to have the ability. And I think the 3-4 or the 4-3, it's a little bit, 6 and 1, half dozen the other, as far as it's more about the ability to get the numbers to the right side of the field that they're running the extra man to.
Coach Lambo, let's go ahead and we were looking at that triple option a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and add that to our screen, and you and I are going to kind of talk a little bit about that. And we're going to go ahead and see it first at kind of real-time speed. So this is essentially Ferris State in the shotgun here, running the triple option. You're going to see a lot of what we have called for them for a long time, eye candy. Here pre-snap, right when we get going, there's a whole lot going on. And by the time you realize what's happened, we're giving the ball to the ref. So let's you and I kind of break this down. Coach, we've got number 22 basically as an H-back right here. Mm-hmm. And you can see as the play starts, he is starting to come back towards the quarterback. You also have a slot who's coming in motion a bit. There's just a lot going on here, Coach. Help us out with this.
Well, there's a lot going on here. And I think one thing that, as to Glow's point, what he was kind of talking about earlier on how we're going to stop Ferris, at the end of the day, you're going to have to play a lot of man coverage, and they're going to be singled up on the edge. And here is where I think this is a perfect example of your eyes have to be so disciplined when you're playing man coverage. For example, right here, there's 6 men on the line of scrimmage. They're snapping the football, and they are running a version of the triple option with a lead blocker in front. And so the 6 men on the line of scrimmage, the defensive end right here is crashing down to take care of the dive, right? The number 6, the outside backer, is saying, okay, I'm going to take the quarterback. Well, that's great. But what they didn't account for was that H-back who was coming in motion is now going back out to be the lead blocker on somebody that's playing man coverage on them. And now you've just exploited the numbers. And this is where you have to be so extremely disciplined from a defensive perspective because, yes, number 6 has the quarterback. The quarterback is going to read this just as he should and pitch the ball to the tailback. And now we've got that lead blocker out in front from the guy that was playing man coverage on him, who makes not even a great block, but is good enough to get in front of the defender, and we get into the end zone. And so this is where when you're playing man coverage against a triple option team, regardless if it's under center or from the gun, I know, having played Harding last year, how the triple option works. They do it in such a different fashion, though, because of the fly motion and the threat of giving the ball on the fly motion. So it's not just that. They could give that, and they could run a dive play. They could run a zone replay. There's so many different variations that they are trying to dress up their offense with. Oh, and plus they have to stop the triple option. It was one of the hardest things in the world to stop when you're trying to play man coverage as well, because Tony, you alluded to it. If you don't make tackles in the open field against that, you're in trouble.
Yep.
Well, guys, that's kind of what we want to do on a little bit of the chalk talk there about Ferris. We're going to go ahead, and I'm going to pull you guys down here as we kind of move into looking at bringing on Coach Annese and the interview that we did with him momentarily. And Tony, I'm going to kind of get everybody out of the way, and we're going to go ahead and pull up Coach Annese, and we're going to start this on.
And we welcome Ferris State head coach Tony Annese to our special edition of Inside D2Football, previewing the national championship game. Coach Annese and his Bulldogs are preparing for their 4th trip to McKinney, Texas for the national finals, with all 4 of those trips occurring since the 2018 season. Well, Coach, we know it's a really hectic week with travel occurring a lot earlier than it normally would for an away game. Is there a little bit of comfort and familiarity with this being your 4th trip to McKinney?
Absolutely. It's, the first time, you didn't know what to expect at all. And, the second time you're like making some tweaks, but by the 4th time we're like, okay, just let's roll with it, So, it's pretty nice knowing that, you're familiar as to what the itinerary is, where we're going, what the community service projects are, and, just all in all, the overall schedule. And so that helps from a comfort level to make sure that you can, be as efficient as you can be, because, it's hard to be tied in with, the routine of a, day-to-day practice, and then, fulfill all the obligations you have out there.
Coach, your postseason run has been a little bit different than last few years. You haven't had to play Grand Valley. And then also you go ahead and got a variety of opponents from, the high-scoring Central Oklahoma to the defending champ with Harding, and then to the dangerous, SR1 champ, Slippery Rock. Tell us a little bit about the challenges that have gone on with that week to week.
Yeah, first off, you get an MIAA champion, and you know what that's going to be, right? I mean, an MIAA champion is always a challenging program. Somebody, Adam's a super coach, and he was the Northwest coach when we first made the semis in 2016, and so we evened up our slate against him at 1-1. But and then obviously Harding is I told Coach Simmons, I said, I sit at the watch the Selection Sunday show, and all I'm worried about is avoiding Harding. Just avoid Harding. Just avoid Harding, because it's such a different deal to try to go through a week in preparation for their system. And offensively you're nervous as heck because you're not going to have that many possessions, and so sure. It's just a whole different, it's almost like a different game against Harding. And then the longer you celebrate those 2 games, and then you start watching Slippery Rock, and you're like, man, I mean, they're a complete program, and coach has done a really good job there. And so, all 3 teams and us, all 4 of us were 1-loss teams, and now we're playing a 0-loss team. So, in Division II football, you have to earn it. I mean, it's wild how you got to be ready every week. And if you're not ready every week and you perform just mediocre, then, your dream ends.
Coach, we had a chance to see you in week 0, and I'm sure you were hoping I wasn't going to mention that. at Pitt State, and we go on up to the booth at halftime with Rob and Sandy, your radio guys, and you guys had one first down at that point, Coach, and we're all trying to wrap our head around what was happening on the field. The things didn't go your way that day, but since that time, boy, they sure have. You guys are unbeaten and just rolling. Help us understand what's happened in that time, Coach.
Well, first off, they did go our way because we scheduled them. And, truthfully, I just believe in that, when I first took the job, we went to North Dakota State, the week before they beat Kansas State. And then it was their first home game, and they raised the banner, and we sat there for 10 minutes watching them celebrate an FCS national championship from the previous year. All right. So that was 2013. And you guys know, you watched our Montana game last year. That was, now everybody's crying about, oh my gosh, that's the hardest venue in all of football. Well, yeah, we found that out. Yeah.
Right.
They broke their all-time attendance record, playing Ferris State. So those things strengthen you. And we could have went and played, it doesn't matter who, and I won't say a team, and won quite easily in a week 0 game. But we went to Pittsburgh, Kansas, and we played a really great team, and they were up for it. And I knew they were going to be up for it because in 22 they came to Ferris in a regional game, and we knocked them off 17-14. So they were up for it, and we, how do you describe it? We, shrunk in the moment. We weren't up for it, but the way you end up being strong and resilient and tough is by going through those experiences. So I knew after the game, I said to the guys, I said, listen, you guys are going to be a really good team. You're going to be a really good team. And I felt that just because this is the best practice team I've ever coached. Like, they work and practice like unbelievable. I can say dogs because we're dogs, but they work like dogs. And so I knew they're going to be, a team that could be really successful, and we have become that.
Well, Coach, after that game, you still had some adversity to work through. You come back home, you got a couple of out of conference games to go through, and you lose Carson Gulker to an injury. And we know coming into the season, you had big plans for Trinidad Chambliss, but when he all of a sudden gets thrust into being QB1 and you don't have Carson there, as a complement to that, that's a tough situation to put him into. And man, he's just responded to it so well. Tell us a little bit about how he was able to grow into that role so quickly.
Yeah. He started, those first 2 games, and I went into the season with 2 starters. So I said to both of them, I'm like, listen, whoever plays the first play doesn't necessarily mean you're the starter. Somebody's got to make the first play. But Trinidad made the first play in both those first 2 games. But we've been of the philosophy that if you got 2, you play 2. And then when Carson got hurt, it was obvious a blow to the team. But Trinidad had showed just extraordinary, just skill and potential even way before that. The year before in 22, we kind of came out with it with Malik and Carson, and I've got a friend who coaches big time Power 4 football, and he loves watching our tape because he just loves Ferris State football. So going into that season, he said, who is number 4? Because he's your best quarterback. And I said, yeah, he definitely was the best during camp. So he was that good even in 22. We knew he had the talent, and then having to be the man really put some burden on his shoulders, but he's grown a lot through it. And he's a super young man, as is Carson. And Carson last week got dressed for practice and rolled out there. That's how long football season is. You break 2 bones and you have surgery and you have a rod in your leg and you're still back at practice. So, but yeah, both of them are super young men.
What we haven't talked about yet, Coach, is your defense. And I tell you, from week 0 when we saw you, they were bowling their necks then. And you know what? They've been outstanding throughout the season. I know the offense gets all the shine. Tell us a little bit more about your defense.
Yeah, the defense, when we've won, national championships, which was 21 and 22, like with 22's team, I mean, the defense was the strength of the team. Caleb Murphy was breaking the sack record. And even in 21, when we played Valdosta in that game, our defense, we scored a touchdown in that game. We had some short fields and people look at even our score against, Slippery Rock the other night, it's like, all right, well, Ferris had 48. Well, there was a pick 6 in the game, which obviously defense, and there was a kick return in the game. So scoring points, people say, oh, you're number whatever in the nation in scoring offense. Your offense must be great. Well, we score a lot of different ways. So our defense has been super. There's a picture of Cepho, who's been, our leader in the middle of our defense. And yeah, going back to that Pitt State game, I mean, how many times did they have to take the field when we were turning the ball over and messing it up? And it was still 6-3 at halftime. It's like, oh my gosh, our defense has been through so many issues. And then we held them to a field goal again after we screwed up. And then I don't think they could take any longer when we returned a kickoff and fumbled that. And then we're like, okay, finally give up a touchdown. But it was we only gave up one touchdown to Pittsburgh State after having that many turnovers. So it's pretty incredible.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Coach, a question we had about your squad was, we got a chance to see you guys up close down in Texas, and those championship teams, how is this group different than that championship run that you went on in 21 and 22? What can you tell us about that?
Well, right there, number 4 is still starting. He started in 22. He's starting now, and he's probably 5'6". So, we got a bunch of little gritty guys in the secondary. But, we got guys that played in that 22 game, quite a few guys that were in that game. And, once you win and you hoist that trophy and you look at that picture that right there is on the screen, it just makes you want it more. And so, our guys just, we went into the year and truthfully, I hate being this way and it's not fair to anybody, including my coaches. But I finally just said, okay, it's go to the national championship game or bust. Cause the year before, we lost to Montana and we lost to Grand Valley and that was it. Right. And yeah, it seemed like such a failure. So I said, we might as well just say it, that's the expectation now. I never thought Big Rapids, Michigan would be spoiled and expect us to be what we are. But yeah, it's like so many people said, after we won it in 21 and 22 and didn't in 23, everybody's like, I mean, come on, Coach. I mean, we got to get back to McKinney. I'm like, oh, yeah. And it's a dream, right? It's a dream for every program to get to McKinney, and so if you count the programs over the last few years, I mean, you're talking about near 170 programs, and we've been able to be there 4 times in the last 6 years. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Well, Coach, you pointed out on Saturday, this is actually your 3rd time facing Valdosta State down there in McKinney, and it's the 3rd different coaching staff that the Blazers have. So as you started to break down this year's Valdosta State team, what are some of the things you see that really stand out about them as an opponent?
Well, it's the same thing that always stands out with Valdosta football as athletes, right? I mean, they run, very athletic. Their defense is built a lot different than the defenses the last couple times we played them. They just really, run to the ball and tackle, I think. And Coach was, AFC Coach of the Year, so congratulations to him. But he's done a really nice job of building that defense. In the 18 game, it was like the first to 50 or, whatever dies. And we got to 49-47 and then the clock finally ended. And then, in the 21 game, we were able to, just really be efficient on both sides of the ball, but really ran the ball. The first half, we ran the ball so well, and now they're stingy. Like, their defense is really stingy, and statistically speaking, if you just look at just all the way down the national stats, I mean, you go scoring offense, scoring defense, you go third down percentage defense, passing efficiency defense. They're just balanced everywhere, which is pretty impressive. That's hard to do. Sometimes statistically you'll see a team that's, really good in this area, but not good in that area, but they are balanced. Their quarterback was there in 2021. He played, I think, 2 plays in our game, but I knew of him because we were smallly involved in his recruiting process, and I knew he went to Valdosta, and he's a really, really steady player, man, a really super player. And so he's done a really nice job, but athletes everywhere, big. Coaches built a little bit different in that they're in the transfer portal, like, unbelievable. And so they got a lot of transfers, and just, he's obviously done a really nice job of putting all those transfers together and getting them to play together and play Valdosta State football.
Well, Coach, we know you have an extremely busy week, and we can't thank you enough for making a few minutes to chat with us on Inside D2Football, and we can't wait to see an exciting national championship game this Saturday in McKinney.
All right, come say hello to me.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that was Ferris State head coach Tony Annese, and again, we thank him for making some time. It's just a really busy week that these coaches have to go through. So, really appreciative that he was able to make some time and give us some really good insights on his team, and also looking ahead to the matchup. So, we have gone through our breakdown of both teams in detail. Really, really good content that we got from the whole crew and our guests as well. So, Whit, let's do a real quick walkthrough of the tail of tape, and let's bring the whole team back in. So we'll bring everybody back on in just a minute, and then we'll kind of go through our picks and a few miscellaneous things, and then we'll call it a show. But Whit, when we look at the tail of the tape here, gosh, everything looks pretty similar here. Anything that kind of jumps out to you that that might be a distinction between these teams, because everything looks pretty close and pretty even.
Yeah, the one thing that really stood out to me and kind of looking at the numbers before we, had the graphic was the Valdosta State turnover margin. And you've gotten to see some of that in the playoffs as well. They've been very safe with the football. And, Ferris State, we've kind of, always kind of talked about that, there is a certain risk tolerance with some of the way they go about things on offense. Sometimes they are going to turn the ball over. Matter of fact, they are up near the top, near the top of the country in terms of fumbles lost. So there is some of that aspect, but they also are going to get a lot of turnovers. But that's the one thing that kind of jumped out to me the most, Chuck, because I thought, we've looked at a lot of these graphics, through the year, Chuck, and you take a look, offensive scoring, defensive scoring, right down the line. These two are not all that different from being a mirror image of each other statistically, and that's very impressive on both sides because they're both pretty elite.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the balance that these teams have across, offense to defense, rushing to passing. And, when we had Todd Cooley on last year, he talked about balance, and he said, balance isn't necessarily I run for 200 yards a game, I pass for 200 yards a game. Balance is when I need to run the ball, I can run the ball. When I need to throw the ball, I can throw the ball. And we see that with both of these teams, although the split actually is pretty even. But we see that with both of these teams. When they have to run the ball, they can run the ball. When they have to throw the ball, they throw the ball very effectively as well, and both stop the run pretty well. So, yeah, it's a very interesting comparison. So why don't we bring the rest of the crew back in, because I think it's a good opportunity to ask a couple of questions of our guests. So there's the whole crew. Thanks everybody for sticking around. I know some of you were backstage for a pretty long time, so thanks for everybody for hanging around. So those are our two head coaches that we just heard from. Obviously, Coach Jack making his first appearance in the national championship game. Nothing new here for Coach Annese, but question to our coaches. Coach Glow, you mentioned this a little bit earlier on when we talked about the game week preparation. it is a short week for these coaches, and it's a very disjointed week. It's just not like your normal game week. They travel on Wednesday, which you normally would not do during the regular season. You get down there, you have a lot of extra media. The kids are exposed to more things. You have community engagement things that you go do. You practice in different locations. Talk to us about some of the things that you remember from going through that, about some of the challenges of managing all those logistics with the team.
Yeah, the first thing is I just remember what a first-class outfit it was. I mean, from the travel to the police escort. I just remember being on the bus. We arrived that night. You get together, if they still do it, the two teams used to get together and have a night out at the same restaurant. The food's fantastic, right? The hotel is nicer than any hotel we ever stayed in, all those types of things. And then you pull up to the venue, the bands are outside playing, and it's got, we mentioned it's a high school stadium, but it feels like you're playing in the Coliseum or something like that for a lot of D2 guys. And I just remember it felt big time. The whole thing felt big time. And I remember practicing at one of the local high schools at an indoor facility, like a high school had an indoor facility, right? And we just were almost to the point where, and I think Coach mentioned it, Coach Annese, they've been there, done that. I think that's probably worth the field goal to a touchdown, to be honest with you, because you've just kind of have a good sense for what it's all about. And that'll be maybe a challenge for Valdosta for some of those kids for the first time. And it's kind of like, you're excited to be in the hotel and that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting. It really will be. And I just remember what a great experience it was. And I would love to get back sometime soon.
Coach Lambo, you played in a national championship game. We won't say how long ago that was, but you played in a national championship game. When you think back on that experience, is it harder as a player to block out some of the distractions and a lot of the extra events that are going on around this and just kind of focus on the game at hand?
Yes and no. I think it's such a unique experience for all the things that Coach Glow mentioned and the travel that you all have mentioned before. But I think you're just taking it all in, and a lot of times it's for the first time. And I do agree with Coach Glow. If you've been there, done that from a player perspective, I do think that adds to the calmness of being able to go and execute in those moments. So you do kind of take it all in. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of firsts. To Coach Jack's point, he mentioned this, the media recognition and obligations that you have to have. And it's not just, the coaches, it's also the players and the quarterbacks and the skill guys that have gotten their names in the paper a lot. So there's so many other things that are distracting. But here's the thing, and we all can attest to this. At the end of the day, when that ball kicks off, you're playing a game that you've played since you were 5 years old. And yes, it might be in a different venue and there might be more people and a few more cameras that are around. But, these two teams are so well coached and they're so well prepared. They have so many athletes running around. I don't think any of that is ultimately going to make a difference when that thing's kicked off and you get to play for 60 minutes or however long it takes in the national championship game.
All right. And 5 years old was about the peak of my football career. When I reflect back on it, I think I was a running back in third grade. I was pretty good, but then things went downhill from there. Well, Whit, we've talked about the games. We've talked about the teams. We've gone through the whole season to date for both of these teams. I think it's time to actually put our picks on the record for the national championship game.
Before we get there, though, Chuck,
all
we
right.
do need to give our sponsor a shout out. Now, you know what? James W. in the comments was calling us out like he normally does. And he went ahead and said, slipping a night, guys? No, we weren't, James. Where's Boss's Pizza? It's right here is where it is. And so we had people kind of, even Craig Fenn was giving us a hard time. Craig, easy. So, guys, real quickly, Bosses is looking to have more franchising opportunities. If you're looking to do something like that with them, hit them up. Go to their website, go to the far right side, pull up that info. But Chuck, before we get there, we do have to bring the coaches in on this. Glow, this is right up your alley. You like to eat. So, pizza of the week from Bosses. There's a lot going on here. Hot sauce, chicken, and cheddar cheese. Things that I normally eat separately. Coach Lambo, you're the healthiest guy on the show by a long shot. So I'm assuming that this would not be something that would be found on your dinner table.
Probably not, but I like wings and I like pizza. So if you combine the two, and I think every now and again that would be a good little meal.
Okay, now Glow, I think you might try your hand at this.
Yes, I could definitely go for some hot sauce chicken and cheddar pizza at any time.
Well, there we go. I'll pay you a favor back, and you and I will have this for lunch tomorrow. I'm sure you can't wait for me to show on up. So for real quick, for the rest of our staff, Ferg, you've been given this a few different eyeballs, and Ferg, you're out.
No.
Oh, Ferg, we thought you were stronger than that. Okay.
No, my stomach is not strong enough for that.
I would try my hand at this, and I would probably shovel down a few pieces before I realized that this was not a good idea. So you know how it is. But we wanted to make sure we showcase their pizza of the week. Chuck, now it's time for us to go ahead and break down the game. So let's first, if we can, coaches, we're not going to keep you on any longer than we've already had you. Let's go ahead, guys, and let's talk for a moment. Coach Lambo, I'm going to let you go first. Tell us your viewpoint on this one. How do you think it plays out? Who you taking?
Well, I'll echo Coach Jackson's sentiments. I think these are the best two teams in the country. They've been 1 and 2, top 5 from the very beginning, and have proved themselves very worthy through our tournament to be at this stage. And so have so much respect for both of those coaches. Coach Jackson and I coached together. Previously, I was the offensive coordinator. He was the defensive coordinator. So got to go against him in practice for 2 years every single day. And I know what an amazing coach that he is, and motivator that he is, and schematic technician that he is. And then it doesn't happen by accident, where you could end up winning your third national championship in 4 years with Coach Annese and what he's done with Ferris State. So to answer the question, who is ultimately going to win the game? Gosh, guys, putting us on the spot from this. I'm going to go with Ferris State is going to win their 4th national championship in 5 years in recent history, and for no other reason other than being there, doing that, the way that they've been able to go through their season, losing the first game and then really being red hot for the last 13, winning in the fashion that they have is going to prepare them to win this football game. So Ferris State.
Chuck, I don't know if you noticed that, but Lambo played the middle more than we do. So let's glow.
I don't know. He's saying 4th in 5 years. He's already picking next year's game.
I was just going to say.
Yeah. 3rd and 4 years. 3rd and 4 years.
Ferg, I think he swerved us 3 times in that 30-second bit. But okay, so Glow, how do you see it, buddy?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. I did do a little bit of research and looking back at some of the last national title games, and there are usually a high-scoring affair, right? Typically, the weather's not an issue. You're playing on turf. I do expect a little bit of a shootout here. I think that both teams are explosive offensively. Both teams are obviously talented on defense. You could probably throw all the comparative stats out the window because these two are and I agree with Lambo. These guys are the best 2 teams in the country. Our tournament, I like what Coach Jack said. It definitely defines the winner in a true fashion. I'm not going to waffle back and forth. I'm going with Valdosta State by a smidgen at the end.
Well, coaches, greatly appreciate you guys coming on with us for the first episode of Wit Chalk Talk. Boy, I don't know. I'm just getting my engine revving, guys. I might have to do some more of that.
I don't know, man. Sequels are usually a fool's errand, Wit.
Well, fellas, thanks once again. We're going to go ahead and kind of drop you guys down. And once again, really appreciate you guys making time with us tonight, okay?
Thanks,
guys. Appreciate you having us.
Thanks, guys. All right. So, Whit, I think we have some picks to go through for the rest of the D2Football.com staff. We wanted to throw this out to the whole team. These are guys that you don't always get to see on Inside D2. They do a lot of great work for us writing the columns throughout the season. So we polled them as well and wanted to get their picks and a few comments. I think we'll see some interesting results here among the picks from the staff. So Luke is going in region. He's picking Ferris State. He likes the Bulldogs. I kind of like what he says here. Bulldogs playing their best at the right time. They had that sleepy first half against Slippery Rock, but they've been dominant against their other playoff teams. And I think he's probably pretty spot on with that. Corey staying loyal to his conference he covers, he's going to go with Valdosta State. He believes that the Blazers are very well balanced on both sides of the ball. Ferris is definitely one of them, as he points out, and he is expecting it to come down to little things like like discipline, penalties, turnovers. Had a little bit of extra dialogue with him. He's expected to come down to some of those things, but he is going with the Blazers. Craig, who covers the Lone Star for us, going with Ferris State. Jumps right into it, says, I think this game comes down to the trenches. Very good observation. I think a lot of games of this magnitude typically do. He likes Ferris State in that matchup. Ryan, who just finished his second year covering the SAC for us, he's also going with Ferris State. I think this is a pretty good observation here, too. Slippery Rock might have given them a bit of a scare, but that might also have been a little bit of a wake-up call and a little bit of just a little bit extra thing that Ferris needs to know that you don't just show up in McKinney and win the football game. So he's going with Ferris. Kerry going with Valdosta State. He likes the Ferris offense. He thinks that they can throw the ball. I think he's pointing out that Slippery Rock had a lot of success throwing the ball last week, and he's expecting Valdosta to have some similar success against that Ferris State defense. AC, our buddy Antonio Clark, who covers the RMAC, going with Ferris State. Ferris will be able to match Valdosta's athleticism and speed, but also bring things to a different level with the physicality. And I think we've kind of talked about that. And Tony kind of mentioned the level of physicality throughout Super Region 3 when we talked about Ferris as well. And of course, he also goes on to point out Trinidad Chambliss. And John Witt, you must have solicited some extra commentary here. I know that John felt that all he had to do was say, hey, they're the Super Region 3 champ. But we appreciate John and all the great work he did covering the MIAA for us this year. And he does like them to go for 3 out of 4 years. So those are the picks among the columnists that do the other written published columns and podcasts for the D2Football.com website. And Whit, I guess it's now time for all of us to put our picks on the record.
Yeah. So guys, since we've gone ahead and we've kind of teased this up about as far as we can go at this point, we're going to go ahead and start. Tony, how do you see this one playing out?
Well, if there's been anything that I think Ferris has shown to be at least a semblance of a weakness at different points throughout the season, it's you can throw the ball on them. You got to do it exactly right, but you can. And we saw that last week. Slippery Rock had a really good game plan. They did it actually a better job than I thought they could in protecting Braden Long and giving him time to find his receivers. And he had matchup advantages, particularly on the outside, that he leveraged consistently. And I think, some of the chalk talk stuff that you did, where the coaches broke down how Valdosta likes to run that RPO and how they like to get themselves into matchup advantages to get the ball over the top and break big plays. I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for Ferris throughout this game. So I expect Valdosta to actually pose a very good challenge for Ferris State in this game. Now, with that said, I still think Ferris is the better team. And the reason I say that is we talked about this both in the chalk talk and just throughout the season of their ability to be multiple. And by that, I mean not only how they run their offense and what types of things they want to try and leverage in terms of getting numbers or taking advantage of where an opposing defense has a weakness, but I also think their ability to play different styles of games. They can play a physical fist fight. They can also play a track meet, and they can play a combination of that. And I don't know if I've seen Valdosta do that combination of things based on circumstances or based on how the game flow is often enough this year to think that they can match with Ferris's ability to pivot and almost be a chameleon and do whatever the game requires. And so because of that, I think Ferris has got the advantage in this game. And so my pick is the Bulldogs.
I like it. K-Ferg, tell me a little bit about how you're arriving at this, buddy.
Well, when I look at Ferris, everything Tony said kind of stands out to me. Their ability to run the ball, to free up their playmakers in space is a big piece of that to me as well. And certainly defensively as well. And I think you kind of saw they're able to make adjustments both sides of the ball is courtesy of Slippery Rock not scoring in the second half last week. On the other side, when you got Valdosta, I think Valdosta is that team that can also make adjustments and show different styles, different views. And, Valdosta has won close games. I look at it less about it being a track meet and more about can you win the close games? And I've certainly seen that from Valdosta State as well. I just kind of want to throw a couple of things out there because, I like numbers. I'm a quantitative guy. Both teams, they're not spectacular. They're just okay on third down defense, 34% apiece. So I expect both of them to have some third and shorts. The offenses to have third and shorts. But Valdosta stands out. 53% of their third downs is what their conversion rate is, third in the country, and 74% on fourth down. Those are some really impressive stats to me. One that's not very flattering is penalties. Ferris is in the bottom 10 in penalties per game this season, and that's one of those intangibles that you really don't want to start committing a bunch of penalties. So for me, I'm going with the Blazers. Okay, I'm going with the Blazers, man. Listen, I think it's just time. I think it's just destiny here. That's just the way I feel about it.
Well, and for the record, K. Ferg, if I'm not mistaken, I think was maybe our top picker this year. At least he was in the playoffs, I know. So, Coach Poe, you were the leader for like half the year in the pick'em. I didn't want to have to bring that on up.
You did. You've been waiting to work that in.
But not that I can throw any stones because Tony and I are cemented in last. But let's not mistake that. But Coach Poe, how do you see this one going, buddy?
So I just want to say, Ferg, just tell us who we have to send this to so your people at Valdosta, your professors and everything, they know who you picked. We'll take care of it.
Yep.
We'll get it covered.
I just want to say you can't spell Valdosta without two A's is what I got this semester.
Look at that. There we go,
Outstanding.
Baby. No, guys, I when I looked at this one and I started breaking it down this week, I think this game's it's intriguing. I think Valdosta State has played well. I think they've really kind of grown as the season went on. They went through some adversity about midway through it. They played some tough games to end the season. And then you look at the playoffs and they've just kind of been quietly taken away at what they do. They're balanced offensively. They're Tony, you said something earlier. I think it was Tony or it was Ferg, actually. I'm sorry. When you said it's Sammy Edwards and the receivers and then the two running backs, right? Like it doesn't matter who it is offensively. They just take care of the football. They don't turn the football over. Defensively, they'll come and strike you. They do some really neat things. And I think they're getting better. I look at the other side of that and you look at Ferris State and you're like, man, the grueling schedule that they have week in and week out, they get everybody's best shot. They're to be the best, you have to beat the best, and they've been getting everybody's best shot. They got it early. They got it late. They had a battle through the playoffs, and man, they just find a way to win. I think the thing that sticks out to me when I look at this game, I think the difference maker is this. If you're Ferris State, you got punched in the mouth last week. You maybe took them a little lighter than you probably should have. You maybe didn't, Slippery Rock comes in there, they give you a run for it, and you escaped. It was almost like it was a wake-up call for the Bulldogs. I don't like being on the backside of a dang wake-up call because I'll tell you what happens. You get punched in the dang mouth, and I don't see it happening again. So I'm going to take Ferris State in this one, guys. I think that wake-up call, they're going to be ready. Coach Annese is going to have them ready. I look for Valdosta State to do some really, really good things. I don't think they're done, climbing. I will say that. I just think that's the difference in this ball game.
Chuck, it's coming down to you and I. Now, no one trusts my picks, Chuck, but they have a little more faith than yours. So how do you see this one, buddy?
Either.
Well, I picked Ferris State in the preseason to be the national champion, so I will stick with the Bulldogs here. I guess overall what I like about this matchup is you can make arguments for either team. Ferg made a really good argument for Valdosta. We already heard really good arguments from Tony for Ferris State. The only couple of things that stand out, I mean, Tony gave us probably as good of a synopsis on this as you'll find anywhere. That was really excellent, Tony. I think a couple of things that he said that stand out to me. Yeah, you can throw the ball on Ferris. We saw that last week, but Slippery Rock was kind of built to do that. Braden Long, he's an excellent quarterback. And Logan Ramper, his ability to make contested catches last week, his ability to kind of create some space. I don't know. I mean, we saw that Valdosta has a lot of speed at the receiver position. I don't know that they necessarily have the same type of guy as a Logan Ramper to do the things that Slippery Rock was so successful with. So you also have to think Ferris is going to be a lot more prepared for that this week. They know that was a vulnerability. I think that they'll be prepared for that. I also really don't like how well Minnesota State was able to run the ball in the middle last week. Now, Valdosta countered by being able to have long drives and keep Mankato off the field as much as possible and score. But we did see that Mankato had some success running the ball, and I think that Ferris will be able to do that as well. And, of course, the other thing that Tony mentioned that I really think about with this Ferris team is just their ability to win any type of football game. If it's high scoring, Ferris can win that game. If it's low scoring, Ferris can win that. If it turns ugly and there are turnovers, mistakes, if officiating's a factor, they can win any type of football game. And I think this is probably going to be a well played and fairly high scoring game. And I do like the Bulldogs to win it.
Fair enough. I see it as a game where turnovers, penalties, and things like that Ferg spoke to, I think these are the kind of situations where this can flare up. Now, I don't disagree at all that Valdosta being their first time, they're going to really need to get their feet under themselves and be able to play loose and play their game and not be tight. Ferris is obviously used to this stage. That all said, I think that Valdosta has the athletes to neutralize the advantage Ferris typically has in that regard. And I think Sammy Edwards is a really solid quarterback. I think he's going to have to make more plays with his feet than we have seen him make all year long. I do think that the Ferris State run game, if they get going in that, this football game could be over very quickly. However, I think this Valdosta team's got a lot of fight in them. I picked them to win the championship right when the playoff seedings came on out. We all did ours, and I picked the Blazers. I'm going to stay with the Blazers here, Chuck.
All right. So the picks are in. I think we definitely had more for Ferris, but there are a few picks there for Valdosta State as well. So we've got love for both teams, and I think we're in for a really good game. I certainly hope so. That hasn't always been the case the last couple of years in McKinney. I think we're in for a really good game. Can't wait to see this one. I know Saturday is going to be a really busy football day. We're kind of playing this right in the middle of the FBS playoff games that are kicking off. Really do hope everyone will tune into this. We expect it to be great. Support the game, talk about it, socialize it, make sure that that people know you're watching and supporting it, because it's a very big deal for us, and it's a huge deal for these teams, and it's everything that they work for. So, Whit, a few shout outs for appreciation.
Yeah, we want to make sure, as always, we go ahead and, we use different forms of media during this show. A lot of the Flow Sports stuff, they help us on out with this. And, once all parties involved, thank you very much for helping us get this show. And we wanted to show our appreciation right here. But, Chuck, essentially this has been a great season we've had here. And at the same time, we greatly miss our guy, Brandon Meisner, who is still on the mend. Buddy, we haven't forgotten about you. Love you. And I hope to have you back on the sideline next year. Great D2 football season, Chuck. And hopefully we'll have a great contest on Saturday as well.
Yep, absolutely. We're closing in on 2 hours, so we will bring this to a close. But last couple bits of housekeeping. Harlan Hill announcement will be made tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll know who walks away with the Harlan Hill Trophy. We'll have the news as soon as that is announced. So watch for that tomorrow. And then we do plan on doing a championship wrap-up on Sunday, which will be our last scheduled event for the season. Which seems pretty incredible to say because it's been a long season, but we've had a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone who's been along for the whole year. And for those of you who will be back on Sunday, we'll see you then, and definitely hope everyone enjoys the national championship game on Saturday. So we're just a shade under 2 hours, guys. We're right under the buzzer. So we'll roll the outro. Everybody enjoy the national championship game.